So of course, it's 2023. It's been 2023 for a while now. And I think a lot of people who are looking to buy a laptop are wondering what is the best laptop to buy in 2023? Or more specifically, what's the best Mac to buy in 2023? And I'm here to make the argument that the MacBook Air M1, not M2, is the best MacBook to buy in 2023 and might even be the best deal in tech right now. And I'm gonna explain why. So I bought the M1 Macbook Air on the day it originally came out. So that was around late 2020, so around November 2020. And it was actually replacing my 2020 MacBook, 16-inch MacBook Pro. So that same year, just earlier in that year, so it hadn't even been a year old. And it was working really well for me. But after trying the M1 MacBook Air for a couple weeks, so to be fair, in the first couple weeks, because like I said, I got it immediately when it came out, there were some software issues, there were some teething problems with the Apple Silicon transition from Intel. So there definitely were some issues that I was trying to overcome. That being said, I found the MacBook Air was super cool. I mean, when I say silent, I mean whisper, well, it has no fan, so it's just completely silent. So if we just dig in a little bit deeper in terms of performance, I would describe my usage in terms of laptops as like a light power user. So I wouldn't say I was a light user or a casual user, but I would say like a light power user. I use my laptops to run some design apps like Figma. I use, everything that I use to run this channel. I use my laptop to run the channel, so all the software I use, so stuff like DaVinci Resolve, I use on my laptop as well. So all of that kind of stuff is what I've been using on this MacBook Air, and it just cruises. I don't think I've even really scratched the surface, which is why I say I'm a light power user. I wouldn't say I'm a power user, because maybe a power user, like a real power user, might be able to give this MacBook Air some problems. But for me personally, zero. It just cruises, does everything just silently, never gets hot. It's obviously easy to carry, it's light, and it just does everything perfectly. So if we talk about the form factor, the battery life, I mean, I'll say the battery life, it's outstanding. So you do have laptops with better batteries now. Obviously with the M1 MacBook Pro, those newer versions, the thicker versions, and then also the, of course, the M2 MacBook Air, M2 MacBook Pros. They will have slightly better battery life, but it's not a significant jump. I'm still getting around 8 to 10 hours of use on the MacBook Air. You never really have to think about charging it really at all. The standby mode, I mean, it stays in standby for weeks. This is incredible. And of course, because it's an Apple Silicon Mac, it comes with all those kind of little benefits like universal control, which is something I didn't actually know if I would use, but it is a little bit nifty because, if you have your iPad on your desk and you're using your mouse, it is just like magic just to glide the cursor to the iPad and start using the iPad with your mouse, which honestly, once you tried that, I don't think you're gonna wanna go back. A slight issue that I had with my Intel Intel-based Mac is when I was connecting to my studio display, there was a slight bug. It might have been fixed by now, to be honest, but there was a slight bug which meant that my camera wouldn't work when connected to the studio display when it was in clamshell mode. So if the laptop was open, it was fine. Once you close the laptop and had it in clamshell mode, the camera in the studio display wouldn't work. Like I said, they might have fixed this, but it was an issue late last year for me. Okay, so let's look at some of the competition that's kind of already out there, because obviously if you're potentially thinking about getting this M1 MacBook Air, if I'm convincing you, I think it's good to know what other options you have. So obviously there's the newer options, but I also want to look at, the slightly older MacBook Pro, maybe even Intel-based MacBook Pro. So to be honest, I think this M1 MacBook Air crushes anything Intel based. So if you had to choose, in my opinion, between like a really juiced up Intel MacBook Pro, which on paper just looks amazing because of all the specs, I would still go with any of the M1s, but if you want a budget, definitely the M1 MacBook Air. I think people get caught up in getting the latest and greatest, the newest one, the newest one, the newest one. But to be honest, like I said, and I'll go through the rest of the other options, but like I said, the M1 MacBook Air, the performance-wise, is amazing. And definitely better than, I would say, all of the Intel Macs at this point. It's a big statement, but I would say all of them. Even the high-end, because remember, I replaced a 16-inch MacBook Pro Intel-based Mac with a MacBook Air, which is crazy. Because, and just to digress a little bit, I tried one of the older MacBook Airs, like I think like a 2019 MacBook Air, and those were terrible. Overheating, underpowered, terrible, they're a mess. So I was kind of thinking, you know, this could be the same issue, but it turns out that I was completely wrong. Okay, so how does this compare to the M2 MacBook Air? So this is I think the most obvious comparison you can make, and I think, me personally, I've obviously had the M1 MacBook Air, like I said, since 2020. It's 2023. I've seen the MacBook Air M2 come and go, like in terms of coming out, and I haven't really felt any need or any necessity to even look in that direction. The only thing, in my opinion, the M2 Air has over the M1 Air is potentially, colors. If you want a different color, that kind of cool starlight color, stuff like that, then you might want to go with M2. If you want just a slight redesign, then again, you might want to go with M2. If you want a notch, then again, you might want to go with the M2. For me, I don't hate the notch, because I do have the latest MacBook Pro from work with the notch, and it's not that bad. But I would prefer if it wasn't there. And I think in a smaller screen with the Air, you know, having that notch is not ideal. So in terms of performance between the two machines, I actually haven't really tested out the M2 Air, to be completely honest, but I think it would be very, very similar to this M1 Air. From what I've heard, is very, very similar. And if you look at a task I use my laptop for video editing, design, you know, or having a lot of tabs open, things being like, having a lot of applications open, then regardless of, you know, what it says on paper, the reality is you can still complete the same task. So there's not really much to gain in terms of performance. There's no point in paying extra in terms of performance. So now maybe you're seduced by having the latest and greatest, you know, the M2 MacBook Pros. Now, obviously they're slightly thicker, slightly heavier, slightly bigger than the Air. And I know if you want to get, maybe you're not so concerned with money. I mean, I think everybody is at this point, but I would still really consider going with the Air. So let me explain. Now, I have the M2 MacBook Pro. I use it for work. I got it as part of my job, so I use it for work, and it's like the really beastly one. I think it's got like 32 gigs of RAM. You know, it's very powerful. But I'll be honest, when I'm done with work and then I go on my MacBook Air, maybe to do some browsing, YouTube, whatever, design, whatever, I'm telling you, I don't feel this massive difference in performance. Now, of course, look, if you're doing heavy video editing, 4K, 8K, whatever it is, of course, you need the M2 MacBook Pro. And to be honest, you wouldn't even be watching this video because it would be clear that you just need more power. But if you're watching this video, I reckon you probably don't need the power you think you do. The M2 MacBook Pros are just, for the average person, they're just way overpowered. I don't know what you're gonna do with them performance-wise. I don't know how you're gonna make the most out of it. I think you're buying too much laptop, if that makes sense. buying the M1 MacBook Air. Even the M1 MacBook Air, I would say, is too much laptop for most people. So then to take it to this M2 MacBook Pro, you know, you're just never gonna make the most out of it. And with money tight right now, if you could find a refurbished M1 MacBook Air, let's say with, I say upgrade, if you can get the 16 gigs of RAM, a bit more memory, so maybe 512 or 1 terabyte, and you can get that even secondhand. So secondhand, let's say 1200. I know you can get a new for under 1,000. So I just think it's just very compelling, and I think it's very underrated. I think Apple releasing the M2 would have swayed some people into thinking that they should get M2 over the M1. The differences aren't that big, and for me, the M1 is really a champion. I've had it, like I said, since it came out. So this is over 2 years. It's worked flawlessly. I love it. It's light, easy to use, zero problems. Would highly, highly recommend it. So just to wrap up, if you are looking for a Mac in 2023, don't be seduced by the newer ones, the M2s, the newer Air, or even what's to come. I really do think save the money, get an M1 MacBook Air, and you won't regret it. Honestly, you won't regret it. I know it feels like I'm selling this, but for me, it's less about selling the M1 MacBook Air, but more about helping people make a better decision in terms of buying a laptop, because you're gonna waste money, in my opinion, buying a more expensive Mac, because it's gonna be too much laptop for you. I think if you're watching this, you do any design, even some video editing, like I said, all the videos you've watched in the last 2 years here have been edited using an M1 MacBook Air, and it hasn't even gotten hot. Obviously no fan, zero problems. I don't even use it to its full capacity, the M1 MacBook Air. So I'm telling you, for most of the people watching this, you don't need it. Save a ton of money. We all need to save money these times. So if you found this useful, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. It takes a moment for you, but it means the world to me, and I'll catch you in the next one.